Threats to the economic miracle. The realistic truth is the Israeli economy is still in its infancy. And the tech boom happens to have coincided with certain catalysts, including the tech stock bubble, Yozma, the immigration wave, and on a geopolitical level, Oslo. The reality is, most of these catalysts have disappeared by now. In 2000, the tech stock bubble burst. In 2001, the peace process crumbled. By the end of the 90s, Soviet immigration exhausted itself and largely dried up. From 1996 to 2000, technology exports doubled. In 2000, the VC bubble, venture capital, burst, and investments in Israel plummeted. And yet, Israel's market share of global VC increased 15 to 30%. Pretty astonishing. And when banks were collapsing in the US, neither Israel nor Canada experienced a single bank failure. Israel's banks adopted conservative lending policies, money being leveraged 5-to-1, with no subprime mortgages. What a nightmare that turned out to be in the United States. Nonetheless, Israel may be overexposed to venture finance that could in fact become scarce, being funded by institutional investors, including pension funds, endowments, and sovereign wealth funds. So, Israel set aside a certain amount of funding for alternative investments, considering that global falling markets diminish what's called innovation finance. Good idea? Probably so, but there are dangers still on the horizon. For example, many tech companies have gone to 4-day work weeks, and that obviously can mean lower productivity. Additionally, many startups have closed for lack of new financing. There's also been an overdependence on global venture capital and export markets. And in Israel's case, there are no regional markets in the Middle East. Furthermore, regional security remains a threat. And who can ignore the Iranian threat? After all, should Iran succeed in developing nuclear weapons, the likely result will be a nuclear arms race throughout the Arab world. And that, in turn, might just freeze foreign investment in the region at large, and of course that includes Israel. Bibi Netanyahu declared that the first stage in the Iranian goal is to terrify Israel's most talented citizens into leaving the country. There's also the threat of a brain drain from Israeli universities. In spite of the fact that the Hebrew University and the Weizmann Institute have been called the best places to work in academia outside the United States. We should recognize that Israel's academic lead has been lessened in recent years, and also that many faculty retire or teach abroad. So what's the biggest threat to Israel's miracle? Maybe it's the tech sector forging ahead, but the rest of the economy not keeping up. Combine that with a relatively low participation rate in the economy. After all, just over half of the population are productive, compared to 65% in the United States. The reason for that has to do with the large number of ultra-religious Haredim, ultra-Orthodox, as well as the number of Israeli Arabs, who also participate at a lower level in the economy. And as important as military experience is to the Israeli economy, the great majority of ultra-Orthodox don't serve in the army at all. That's because at the founding of the state, David Ben-Gurion exempted some 400 Orthodox Jews from the military. After all, the ranks of religious Jews had been decimated by the Holocaust. But now that number has swelled to tens of thousands who do not serve in the IDF. And the upshot of that is that without experience in the army, in the IDF, ultra-Orthodox Haredim have a much harder time networking in the business community. Israel also suffers from a rather chronic mistrust of Israeli Arabs, and that hampers their productive participation in the economy. Moreover, Arab society is still pretty much patriarchal, and that, of course, means that women have a harder time participating in the job market. Couple all of these realities with the fact that Haredim and Arabs have higher birth rates than the rest of the population. Some call it a demographic clock that has reduced the workforce. All of this should be seen against the fervent determination of Bibi Netanyahu to make Israel one of the top 10 per capita economies in the world. We should recognize that there remains a gap in living standards between Israel and other developed countries. Yes, Israel's business sector is among the world's best, yet the quality of life and public services remains relatively low. There are still emigration fears that the brightest and best may leave Israel. Perhaps the greatest danger may be Israel's inability to keep its economy growing, as well as its inability to spread assets evenly within society. But let's not forget the big picture that is still pretty encouraging. And that is worth talking about. So let it be Bibi.